So the cause and effect of the collapse in Venezuela. Our claim is due to the political mismanagement of the economy, millions of Venezuelans are leaving the country with little hope for a better future.
Now, so I did a political lens. So the political crisis in Venezuela essentially started because of the failed economic policies of Hugo Chavez. So when Hugo Chavez took to power, the price of oil at the time in the world was fairly high, and Venezuela had two main allies in the world, China and Russia. And China had a huge demand for oil during the time. And so Venezuela took to buying off large loans from China and ranking up their debt at immense levels. But they didn't care at the time because they could just pay it off with their oil money. And they didn't envision that the oil prices would collapse later in the future. So when Hugo Chavez died of cancer, his successor, Nicolas Maduro, came into power right when oil prices were beginning to collapse. And because of that, the economy of Venezuela virtually collapsed with inflation rising throughout the roof. So because of that, Nicolas Maduro had to get a hold on the people to ensure that civil war wouldn't break out. He had to establish law and order. And so he took to himself to enact like very authoritarian policies with him keeping himself in power more. And because of that, the president of the National Assembly at the time, Juan Guaido, declared Maduro a usurper of power and declared himself president. With that now, in Venezuela, can be seen as a intense standoff between the people who support Juan Guaido and the military who supports Nicolas Maduro. And so the conflict can now be seen as a proxy battle between Russia and the United States, as whoever controls Venezuela politically controls a major section of the world's oil supply.
And talking more about the Hugo Chavez, I'm talking more about the economic crisis that led to the collapse of Venezuela. So Hugo Chavez became president in 1998, following an anti-corruption and pro-employment rhetoric. During his presidency, Asia had an economic crisis that caused their oil production to collapse, causing Venezuela to grow and be allies with Russia and China. This caused Venezuela's profit to grow and it gained a lot of money. And during causing Hugo Chavez to have control of a lot of money, and since he followed a rhetoric to promote education, healthcare, and employment, he used all of his money, the money gained from oil production, to be invested in these social programs to help Venezuelans. And with the Bolivarian Revolution, basically an ideology that was based on government-led economy and promoting nationalism, he took a stronghold of the economies of Venezuela, so causing him to have control of the money and spend it the way he wanted to spend it. And so with that, he created the PDVSA, which is abbreviated in Spanish, but it means the petroleum of Venezuela, which basically is a state-owned oil company, oil and natural gas company, which recently Nicolas Maduro sold to Russia as some kind of payment because of the debt they have with them. And so here's a graph where it explains that Venezuela nationalized oil before Hugo Chavez's presidency, but the production grew before his presidency, and once he got to presidency, oil was at its highest, meaning there was more money during that time. But the problem was that as he continued to be presidency, he also had a mismanagement of how oil was produced, causing him to also have production to decrease during his presidency. Because also because of Hugo Chavez, because Hugo Chavez caused all the spending to be done in social programs, there was an unemployment rate to decrease during his presidency, and also poverty to decrease too. And so, with all the spending and the oil collapse after his as you can, if you saw the last graph with the production decreasing, he also used a lot of money from other countries and borrowed, like Orson said, which they thought that they would be able to pay back, but unfortunately, during Hugo Chavez's presidency, there was still debt that he had going on steadily. It was a constant, but once the collapse, it kind of grew and has continued to grow since the economy hasn't been fixed yet. And so during Nicolas Maduro, who became president in 2013, his presidency kind of followed the same authoritarian rule as Chavez did, and now he has been having a tight control over the people in Venezuela, and as well as its economy.
So I was looking to more like kind of focus on the people. So because of the economic crisis and such, 3.3 to 4 million people have fled the country since 2015, and making them one of the single largest populations to be displaced from their country. So, and as you can see on this picture, they're going everywhere from the U.S. to Argentina. And the main reasons is that there's little to no food, there's no medicine, and they've run out of medicine and vaccines, and violence and crime is running rampant in the country. So there's no food. The government can't really afford to buy any, so stores are empty. Most stores are looking like this. There's just barely any food. Most people can't even purchase it with the inflation rates. And then, so people are also falling to looting these stores to get food because they can't afford anything. And then other ways to get food, such as like programs and school lunches that we have for free. Venezuela used to have, but they've been pretty much shut down, and so kids aren't getting food at school anymore either, and that's also affecting their education, students' education, and some leaders of Venezuela are worried that the next generation is going to become illiterate. So that's a big concern right now. And then another thing is no medicine or vaccines. There's a huge medical crisis right now for hospitals don't have enough supplies anymore, so people are having to bring their own scalpels and syringes and stuff for the very little medicine. Diseases that are normally preventable with vaccines are coming back, like measles was practically wiped out before this economic outbreak in Venezuela, and now it's a huge problem. Antiretroviral drug medicine that helps prevent HIV is it really have no more, and people have to flee to other countries to get help for that. And then since there's no food, children are very malnourished, and you go to a hospital in Venezuela, you'll just see a bunch of kids at death's door, which is really sad. And then violence and crime. So on average, 73 people are killed in Caracas, which is one of the biggest cities in Venezuela. Like I said earlier, there's constant looting of stores and restaurants and things for food. And then also, you can be jailed or executed for even speaking against the President Maduro. Police have been arresting so many people recently that they just started to kill people because seems easier. It seemed easier to them than dealing with them setting the prison and arresting them, so they just kill them. So you can, if you're caught like stealing from a restaurant, you'll be executed or killed. Killed.
And so my paper focus more on the futuristic agenda and how they can prosper once again in Venezuela. But they first have to tackle the political and economic problems that they face. That's the only way they can really get back on track. And the reason why I think people really dismiss these ideas is because it's kind of embedded in how past and how people already think about Venezuela and the oil industry and history itself. So the ways that they can uprise again is by stabilizing hyperinflation and by controlling more of the sources of government and by not restricting no more foreign aid. So the root of all the destruction in the oil industry, it started from political reformation, and the political reformation, it links to the economic downfall to the oil industry, and that's what the bottom picture represents, is how it declined. It basically happened during Nicholas' presidency, basically. So his policies that try to enforce more on the oil industry didn't really help, and I think that was his biggest mistake, was focusing more on the oil industry than rather the actual problems in Venezuela. And his biggest mistake was shifting the control of the oil industry to the military, and that was a really huge adjustment because the military is not really loyal to Venezuela or to him, so the loyalty is very questionable. And his presidency lacks checks and balances, so it's no one to really go behind him and check what he's doing and authorize what he's doing and help him make decisions. It's just basically him. And secondly, they need to allow foreign aid because they think that they can do it on their own, but it's not going to work. And he has tried to make more enforcements by building more technological advancements, and it hasn't worked, and trying to do the money they don't have. So if they allow foreign aid, it will help them more, and it will help them with more equipment and give more policy ideas to help uprise again. And finally, they need to reestablish the economy, because once they reestablish the economy, the oil production will grow within itself, and the main problem that's stopping it is hyperinflation. And hyperinflation's biggest competitor is the black market, because it's allowance and it's unrestricted and no one's controlling it. And what they have to do for the hyperinflation is stop pro-inflation policies such as dollarization, which is basically them substituting their currency for ours, which won't help and only cause more inflation for the future. They need more currency reform exchange rules and need to authorize exchanges in the black market. And when they follow this, the oil industry itself will grow again, and that will help uproot Venezuela and it will help it grow. I think this is important because it's too unstable now to just focus on the oil rather than not the problems that contribute to the fall of it in the beginning, which is why I think it's very important.
And so our conclusion is, even though Venezuelans have no hope for the future, there's still a possibility for the economy to reestablish and prosper once again in the oil industry and service the needs of their people. So basically, U.S. sanctions that U.S. sanctions that the United States have imposed in Venezuela have not had a positive effect to Venezuela, and instead of doing that, we would encourage to have foreign aid, like Catherine said, to help Venezuelans and in their country.
All right, thank you, Brady team, for going first. Yay. All right, do we have questions from the floor for this team? All right, so our time is kind of over. So I'm going to write your time on here. 16. Okay. So I'm writing your time on here just so you can be aware of your time and practice it to bring your time down. Questions from the floor for this team? Questions for them? Or should I go into the prepared future questions here?
Wait, is it still being recorded?
Yeah.
Hang on, I've got to do their oral response here. So my first question is going to be, I'm going to make this one be for Orson. Orson,
Yes.
how did your team go about developing your team research question?
So we went about developing our team research question by essentially just looking at currently what's going on in Venezuela, and yes, there you go. So yeah, we we looked at Venezuela, what's going on right now, and so we asked ourselves like, how did this happen? You know, I think that's one of the main things that people kind of wonder when they look at something like this. You know, you look at places like Syria or Iraq or North Korea, and people often ask like, how did this place get into this sort of mess? And so that's kind of the question we essentially came up with when we saw Venezuela.
My next question is going to be for, let me make this one for Catherine. What information did you learn about the topic that you have been unaware of, and why is this information significant?
Excuse me, what I was aware of?
Yes, what information did you learn that you weren't previously aware of, and why was that important information?
For the presentation or my personal research?
For both, for either, for your individual or for your group.
I think what information I learned from my personal one was that if the U.S., it's more like a counter argument for mine, I guess, a little bit, is that if the U.S. helps Venezuela, will it really help them in the future? Would they really have like more strings attached to the help? Would they do it because they care, because they want for the oil, because they know that if they help them, they want something in return? Will it really be effective, or will it just be them taking over? And I think that was information I learned. I think that was interesting, that the writer said that most likely will happen, and it will not really help Venezuela, but help us, benefit us more.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Let's go to, let's see. Let me make this one for Calvin. What changes did you make to the team presentation as a result of your discussions?
Like, what do you mean team report? Like our papers? Or?
Yes, taken from your papers.
Well, some changes I think we made is that we didn't necessarily cut, but we didn't use a lot of things that we each had in our papers. So we tried to kind of use what each one of us had that was similar and we could use in our claim, and brought those ideas together to make a presentation.
Okay. Have any specific?
I guess for me, for example, one thing I kind of add is that in my paper I didn't really talk much about the population itself, and I feel like that for this thing I had to maybe develop that idea a bit more. Is what change I had.
Excellent. Okay. And here's my last one for Valeria. What part of your outcome, as you came through the other side of this process, suggested the need for possible further research? If you were going to really go into detail on this, what do you still need to know?
Well, with the problem still going on, and it does have a long history of the problem has a long history, so there's still new information coming out about Venezuela. So probably further research, if we want to talk more about the problem, it would be like still going before how Venezuela, because if you saw in the chart that I had, Venezuela nationalized oil before Hugo Chavez's presidency. So in this presentation, we just talked about at the beginning of Venezuela, at the beginning of Hugo Chavez's presidency. But I do think that if we talk more, if we would do research before his presidency, I think that would work. And also, since, like I said, there's new information. For example, Venezuela Maduro recently sold the VSA company to China. So I was like probably research on how the economy has been going on after the collapse. Because talking.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Yay! Good job, good job, good job. How you